Hello, my name is Dean Heald. Uh, this is part 3 of a 10-part series of webinars that we are recording. Today it's going to be supporting your anxious child. Some of those basic understandings, what your child's going through, and some of the things that we can do to support our children when they are feeling anxious. These webinars are meant to be, kind of quick and give you the some basic ideas or some basic understandings, or for some of us, just simply refreshers, some reminders of some of the things that we can do to support our children when they are struggling. So when we're talking about anxiety, we're there can be generalized anxiety. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Or there can be specific or focused anxieties, things that they're zoning in on. They're worried about something specific, worried about being alone, worried about going to bed at night, what might happen, worried about their parents going out somewhere, or in today, a lot of our kids might be worried about what's going on in the world, and specifically the global pandemic. So that would be a focused anxiety. I'm worried about if I go outside, am I going to get sick? That kind of thing. So one of the first things we can do is we can inform ourselves. We inform ourselves about what the child is worried about or what they're going through. We also inform ourselves about, so if they're specifically worried about the pandemic, well, let's get some information about the pandemic. Knowledge is power. Knowledge can be very comforting, right? Give them, let them understand exactly what's going on, and specific to those worries. And this needs to be age appropriate, of course. So if we have a 7-year-old that's worried about the global pandemic and a 15-year-old, the information, we might get a little bit more in depth with the 15-year-old, but we're going to inform them. We're going to learn about what's going on. We're going to inform them about some of the important understandings about whatever it is that they're focused on, whatever it is that they're feeling anxious about. Let's talk about with your kids, what's within your control, what's outside of your control, and really emphasizing the importance of the things that are within our control, the things that we can do something about, we take steps to do something about it. The things that are outside of our control, we trust the people whose responsibility it is to control that. So the bills. Paying the bills. If when I was a little guy, I often heard my parents talking about the bills, and I spent a lot of time worrying about that. And had somebody come to me and say, "Hey, you know what? That's an adult thing. Adults talk about that. It's normal. We'll take care of it." It's like that kind of thing. I probably would have felt a little bit better, and had the parents shared some information on that, and also talked about okay, let's be realistic. We're not, the power isn't going to go off all winter long. I was often worried about the power going off for some reason. But if my parents would have come to me and said, let's be realistic, don't worry about it. The power is never, doesn't go off all winter long. They're not going to leave us in the cold or anything like that. Some reassuring, not minimizing, but reassuring, giving them, helping them understand what is a real risk, what is a perceived or unrealistic risk, separating those things. That might help calm some of those anxieties. And then limiting the exposure whenever possible. So if a child is anxious about world events right now, perhaps limiting not having them in the room when we're watching the news. That's something small that we can do. Keeping adult conversations amongst the adults, and keeping kids and having conversations that are appropriate for kids when the kids are around. That's a big one. Just making sure that, because kids are always listening. If they're in the room, they're listening. And the thing is we might be saying something that doesn't really concern them, or we don't think that they would worry about. If they're filtering that in, if they're translating, or if they're understanding it in a way that wasn't meant, you weren't meaning to understand it, it wasn't for them, and it wasn't for them to worry about, doesn't mean that they're not going to. Okay, and they will take that in their own in their own way. So best thing that we can do, limit their exposure to those conversations, limit the exposure to that information if it's inappropriate for their age. Generalized anxiety, this is a little bit different, okay? And it says disorder here. Let's not worry about that. We're not going to talk about generalized anxiety disorder so much. Um, but just because somebody isn't diagnosed with an actual disorder doesn't mean that they don't struggle with some generalized anxiety issues. And this means I have anxiety every day, and it's about a whole bunch of different things. It's just I spend a good portion of the day anxious about something, and we see some of those symptoms here. If and just because they have these symptoms, I always say make sure, don't assume that we're talking about anxiety. Don't assume that we're talking about a disorder, right? We're not jumping to any conclusions, but here's some of those symptoms of generalized anxiety. And what that means is just a broad range of anxiety, broad range of stress and worry, and it's ongoing. We all worry sometimes. We all have difficulties controlling stress, or we all have ups and downs in our moods. That's perfectly normal. If anxiety continues over a long period of time, 1, 2, 3 months, and it varies, we're worried about several things, different things, and it changes day in and day out, or there's several things that each day. Okay, at that point, we might be talking about some generalized anxiety. Okay, and those are some of those symptoms. So what do we do about that? Lots of different approaches. One would be the social coping strategies. A lot of times with those kids who are struggling with that generalized anxiety, they're going to want to withdraw. They're going to want to spend time all by themselves. And it's not to say that they can't take some quiet time, but let's make sure that we're mixing in that engagement as well. They might not feel like spending quality time with the family. That's okay. Let's encourage that. Let's build that exception in, expectation in. So bringing them along to those large family events, or even just in the time, hey, come out. I know you're not hungry. Why don't you come sit with us while we eat? I know you're not feeling like playing a game. Why don't you come and sit with us? And just so encouraging that and letting them know, hey, you know what? I like it when you're around. Maintain a routine. So they might not choose willingly to get up and get out and get active and get doing stuff. They might not want to accomplish much during the day. That's okay. Let's let them know, here are the basic expectations. Here, particularly right now when our kids are home, and there's a lot more there's a lot more time when they're at the house because of the isolation that is being asked of us with the pandemic. Great to build a routine around. I know that we're not as active as we normally are, but here are the things that I expect each and every day. The basics, brush your teeth, eat a good meal, get your chores done, that kind of family time. Include family time in the routine, right? And that'll bring some of that engagement. That'll create opportunities for just some learning, some in the moment, some opportunity to model. Hey, yeah, sometimes I get anxious sometimes, but you know what? My happy place is being around my family, and having an opportunity to just talk and laugh and interact sometimes is a great way to address anxiety. Recruit support. It can be overwhelming sometimes when you don't have the answers for your kids. Express love, and ask questions. I'll share the contact information for Kw'umut Lalem at the end here, but the wellness team at Kw'umut Lalem, just whether it's a little question or a big question, they're there to answer your questions. They're there to support. So asking those questions, or recruiting support from the people around you. I know for me that my uncles and aunts, my mom, my mother-in-law, my wife, they've been wonderful sources of support and information over the years. Asking the people who've been there, done that, gone through it, raised teenagers themselves, asking some of those questions. Hey, what do you do? Or what's a different way I can respond to this? Or what do you think is going on? Having those conversations, sometimes we don't even need to, get answers. Sometimes it just feels good to talk about it. Emotional coping strategies. Okay, learn about what triggers anxiety. Learn about what's going on with your child. Learn about patterns. Perhaps it's nighttime. Perhaps it's it's when they hear a stressful conversation, or when they're around adults that raise their voice, or when they're around a big crowd of when people come over, or when they leave the house. What is it what's the patterns behind the anxiety? Where can we start predicting that the anxiety is going to happen? And when we know what to predict it, we can start acting proactively. We can start doing some of those things proactively to support our children prior to when they feel that anxiety. Practice mindfulness, like communicating with them, or practicing that with them. Hey, like going inside, relaxing, reflecting on, where am I at right now? What do I need right now? How am I feeling right now? So in my house, we put a number on it. Hey, you seem a little bit agitated right now. Where are you at? And then my kids will say, well, I'm at a 2 out of 5, or I'm a 3 out of 5. And, expressing and getting them to express feelings, getting them to be mindful of where they're at in the moment. It gives us the opportunity to coach them a little bit on, okay, so I hear that you're feeling a little bit stressed out about me going out. What are the steps that you can take, or what can I do to support you in that? Individualized coping strategy, kind of similar to what I was just talking about. Everybody copes with stress. Everybody copes with anxiety in a different way. Okay. Teaching our kids to individually cope, teaching our kids that, for them, this is what works for you. Here's what works for me, and I'll model that for you. I'll show you that I'm going to engage in my own coping strategies, but what works for you? What can you do for yourself prior to those times of stress, or during those times of anxiety, to make yourself feel a little bit better, or make it so you can cope with the anxiety that much better, right? Anxiety is something we all go through. Anxiety is something that we all experience, right? The sooner that our kids can recognize that they can control that experience, and they can respond to that experience in their own way, and do things to make themselves feel better, and that's a great skill for life, quite frankly. That's something that they're going to need to know their entire life. But the sooner that they realize that, the more effective they're going to be going forward in dealing with that anxiety. Limit we can't always limit the exposure to stress. Obviously, there's stress. Stress is a part of life, but when possible, limit that exposure to stress. And kind of what I was talking about, having those adult conversations when just the adults are around. If it's a big group situation, like can we practice in smaller groups and those kind of things. Model a positive attitude, model coping, model engagement, model belief in that good things will happen. So if we're constantly focused on bad things, bad people, or bad possibilities, our kids are going to take that in. Our kids are going to recognize that. Our kids are going to take that on. So yes, there are stresses in life. Yes, there's people that challenge us, and it's okay to recognize that, making sure that we're also, modeling strength and upbeat, positive attitude as well. Our kids will take that on. Those physical coping strategies, these ones are more obvious, healthy food choices. A lot of times people, when they are stressed, they will kind of rely on some of those less healthy options. Okay. Limit caffeine intake. Caffeine is something that is well known to accentuate feelings of anxiety. I know for myself, when I drink caffeine, my brain will almost look for things to worry about, even when there isn't really anything specific that, there to worry about at the moment. My brain will look for that. So limit some of that caffeine intake. Keep active. The best natural medicine for anxiety is just an active lifestyle. And we've talked about that in one of the other webinars, and it'll probably keep coming up. Encourage a great sleep routine. The best thing, another one of the greatest things that I keep saying, the best thing, another one of the great things that we can do for ourselves is just feel well rested. Just, go when we go to bed, get a solid 8, 9 hours, 10 hours of sleep maybe, and wake up feeling refreshed, wake up feeling emotionally and physically able to face the day. Right. And a sleep routine is a way to do that. A certain time, especially for our little ones. Let's get them into bed at a certain time. Let's, structure the last, 45 minutes or an hour of their evening in a predictable way. Make it as pleasant as possible. So when they are going to bed, they're relaxed, because you know what? If they're not relaxed going into bed, if it's stressful, that's when a lot of those times when anxiety come up, the mind starts racing to those what ifs. Mind starts focusing on those things, those worries, and that's when anxiety can come up. And that's going to make that sleep less effective, and that in turn is going to make them feel less, feel not as good the next day, and that'll impact their effectiveness. And so it kind of feeds into itself. All right. So this has been supporting our children with anxiety. If you would like more information on anxiety, I know the people at Kw'umut Leyland and the wellness team at Kw'umut Leyland, they're just packed full of amazing information, and the small questions are the big ones. They're certainly willing to take those calls. So that's the phone number. That's the extension. This has been part 3, and I hope you took a little something from it. Thanks so much.